The idea of this session is, well, the idea of the day is we get to do lots of networking around specific things, and this session is looking at working with children and in challenging circumstances. What my approach, the sort of commonality of my approach in that sort of work is. And I think it's about trying to find the right way to engage the group you're working with. And actually, when I go in to run a session or a workshop or a project, not going in with a very, very set idea in mind. Quite often, you might go in and go, today I'm going to do a DJ course or a DJ project. And I think that can work for some groups, but I have found with the more at-risk young people, it's better to go with quite a fluid idea, and I try and go in with an approach where there might be a little bit of DJing and a little bit of drumming and a little bit of singing, guitar, and maybe some music production, and you sort of see what sparks their interest and run with it. So I think the main thing I'm trying to do as a music leader in that circumstance is be responsive to their needs. And I think, well, I hope that's quite a common theme. We've got 3 people that are going to speak today, and I've already pointed Ian out, so would you like to say a few words?
My name's Ian Barks, and I'm one of the area team leaders for one of the youth engagement service here in Reading. So we're one of the few council-run youth services left around the country because of all the cuts. So I manage a team of youth workers. So there's 3 youth workers that work in the catchment area of Reading, which is predominantly quite an affluent area, but there are some pockets, specifically in the state that Rob mentioned, called the Amsham Estate, which is quite an area of deprivation. The youth service sits within a wider team called the Children's Action Team, which is a multi-agency team, family workers, education and welfare workers. So we effectively funnel in lots of young people. We engage with young people in many different ways, and through those kind of various agencies, we get to know these young people, so we get referrals of people in some quite significant, challenging situations. We also get to meet young people through our work on the estate, so we have street work that goes on, so youth workers go out onto the streets and meet young people in the areas that they hang out at. So, I mean, an example of some of the work that we're currently doing would be, so there's a girls group that we run on a Tuesday night, which is obviously just for girls. It's about 10 to 15 young girls, 13 to 19, although it's probably more like 13, 15, 16-year-olds turn up every week, and they are quite a melting pot of young people, various different issues, from issues with challenges from their parents, for example, so their parents might be facing some significant issues in their life. There's a lot of property around on the estate. Young people often face a real lack of confidence. To be fair, there's not, on the estate historically, there's not been much in the way of drugs and alcohol. That's not something we see too much of, but a real sort of, I think one of the main challenging things is around aspirations. A lot of the young people have really limited aspirations as to how they get out of what their situation at the moment. And so, with this group in particular, this is where we've started working with Rob and Readipop. It's been, well, we've had links with Readipop now for a good few years, and I think you probably agree, Rob, it's different. Every time we try something, it's completely different. We have to take a new approach to how we do that, because quite often, when you start engaging young people with some music, they're interested to a point. They'll pick something up, give it a bit of a strum, plonk a few keys on the piano, that kind of stuff. But if you're not careful, that interest will go very, very quickly. Their attention span seems to be very short, and they need a little bit of structure around that. But of course, if you then structure it too much, then you've got effectively a classroom situation, and they'll just do both. So I think young people will then, in those situations where they're not interested, they will present as being very challenging. And so what we've done recently is we had this ready-made group of girls who did initially show some interest in sort of forming a group, but I think that sort of waned a little bit, didn't it? And then we actually started the group session. So I think it was 6:30. Sorry, was it 6:30 that we started the session? It was 7 o'clock, and then we moved it forward so that a group of young people who were interested could come in earlier and do their thing, with the hope that then other young people who attend the session at the normal time would then be drawn into that. It's, you know, a lot of listening, understanding where they're coming from, not being judgmental. It's those kind of techniques that we kind of employ with, whether it's music or whether it's just working with young people in various settings, really. On that note, I'll hand over to Ben.
Okay, I'm Barry Ramsey. I work for the Youth Offending Service. I'm what's called a restorative justice worker, so some of my work is getting young people to meet with their victims, and that's kind of one aspect. The bulk of my work is doing their reparation work, which is kind of like the community service bit that you do in probation, except in the Youth Offending Service there's much more of a focus of getting to do it for their victim, or it's about it being reparative to them as well, because they're kind of victims of their crime. So we don't do things like litter picking and stuff. We try to find projects that will encourage them or teach them a new skill or build them up. So a massive project last year, and most likely people on, was a kind of art project where we took pallets and cut them up, and we did stenciling, hand-painted stencils and images that were then sold for charities. So we've showed loads of money for local charities, and I think that's in all aspects of our work. I think for me, you've got reparation, but it's about more than that. It's like you're working with challenging young people, so you're trying to address lots of issues in their life. Whatever you come with, it's really a priority for them in their manic, hectic, messy lives. I think in Youth Offending Service we've kind of acknowledged that actually we need a completely different approach to the adult system. So that kind of sounds obvious, but things like unpaid work of the adult system, you turn up late, get back to court. Well, most likely people are late all the time. And often it's not down to them, it's down to their parents as well. If their parents decided to, or forgot to remind them, or if their parents have just decided. I had one mum who said, "Oh, I'll take them fishing today," even though she knew he had an appointment. Well, that's not the young person's fault, and so you have to work with that. So I think we have to kind of wear a really flexible approach to our work. And I've had occasions where I've gone up. There was one lad who was only about 12, I think. I went to pick him up. He was terrified of what we were going to be doing, even though I'd explained to him exactly what we were going to do. And I ended up speaking to him for an hour through a hole in his bedroom door that he punched through the door. Just talking to him through this door, trying to talk him out so that we could then do a session. And that's the kind of level of effort that it takes sometimes to be able to work with young people that we're with. I'm kind of lucky in that they have to kind of do the work. There's always that kind of, it's not the carrot, it's the stick. But they know that ultimately they could be responsible if they don't work with us. But a lot of young people that we work with, their level of understanding stuff is actually they don't care if they go back to court. And so a big part of our job is to try and ensure that they don't and try and work with them.
Hi, I am the Arts Coordinator. I work at Crisis Skylight in Oxford, which is an educational and learning centre for homeless people. And by that, I guess, we mean people who are street homeless, but a whole load of people vulnerable to homelessness. So if you're sofa serving, if you've been kicked out by your parents and you're sleeping on someone else's couch, you are homeless and you can access a service. If you've been homeless in the last 18 months, you can access a service. If you're living in a housing situation where you may become homeless, because we are all 1.5 paychecks away from homelessness, you can access the service. So there's a whole, we have a very broad client base, and it's an incredibly diverse client base. We have about 1,200 homeless people who use the service at the moment, and of those, because we are essentially an adult service, but last year we opened our doors to the 16 to 18-year-olds as well. And so we now have, I think, let me see, we have 260 under 25s who use the service, and we have 40 under 18s who use the service. And just, do people know about Crisis Skylight in Oxford? I'm not sure.
How to say that? Crisis?
Crisis. So it's a charity crisis.
Yeah.
And it is a skylight centre, which means it is one of our, it's a kind of a one-stop shop. A lot of it, and I'll check out some, here are our timetables. You can engage in a whole range of classes, but you can also, in Crisis Skylight, attend vocational courses, vocational training schemes. So we have a cafe that at the moment has a young 16-year-old working there, learning skills. We have almost 100% employment after you've done the cafe training scheme. We have support with housing, support with mental health, support with finding a job, and if you are vulnerably housed or vulnerable to homelessness, you can come and kind of get help with every aspect that you want. It's very goal orientated, so it's about what are your aspirations. We know your situation is rubbish, but what are your aspirations? Let's think about that. Let's start breaking down the barriers. Let's start working out how you can get what you actually want. And people, and I guess one of the beauties of it for young people is you can do an awful lot of it in the building before you have to start going to outside agencies, which means it's much less scary and there's an incredible amount of support to do that. I guess just things I want to say about our under 25s is they are probably the most vulnerable young people in the community. So we work with care leavers, we work with people at the people referral unit at Meadowbrook, and we work with people living in hospice. So most of them don't live with their families, because if their families will have them, then they're not homeless. They are the very vulnerable who are likely to be targeted by people with dodgy intentions, and they are probably some of the most difficult to engage. And we find it difficult to engage them, but we do a range of things. So in our timetable, we put on programmes, classes specifically for 16 to 25-year-olds, but if you're 16 to 25, you can go to any of the classes. At the moment, we've got an art and a cookery class. We also have done music production, and we're going to be working with Readipop to do music production kind of over the next year to really build that side of our programme, because we have music educators, but we do want to develop the skill. And there's a lot of music in Oxford, but it needs to work together better. So there's better signposting for young people, and we need to be able to access people where they are and be able to sort of pull them through and on. We do outreach work wherever it's necessary. So we work with an organisation called Key2, we work with hostels, with One Foot Forward and Wimble House, we work with Meadowbrook, and we try to be as responsive as possible. So we do whatever project they would like us to do in whichever way they think is going to work. And we're very well funded because we don't have government funding. All crisis funding comes from people who give money for Christ at Christmas. So we're very free with our funding. We can do whatever we want, and we have a lot of project partners at the same time. And I would completely agree with you, Barry, that the provocation is always simple. So we have extraordinary success as well with our art projects, where we just get a load of canvases, a load of stencils, a load of spray paint, and help people to do the first one. People who find it really hard to make eye contact, can't even look at the work in front of them because they feel so anxious about it. And then you say, come on, just what colour do you want? And almost do the first one. They've done the first one and it looks really cool. Once you've varnished it, it looks fantastic. You get a whole load of graffiti stencils, these really pretty little 30 by 30 canvases, loads of colours, and just, you start with a spray. What stencil do you want? Come on, just chip. I have that. I might have that one. Tear it out, do it, spray it another colour, varnish it, and suddenly they've got something that looks really good, that looks so much better than they ever thought they could do. And then the next time they do it, they can do that themselves, or then they put the stencils together, or they do a group of 3, or they start working with acrylics, and it just starts somewhere. And by the end of the session, they may have 2 or 3 canvases that they've got something to give, you know, a present to give that they've made. And it's really, it feels so much about building confidence and self-esteem, and also engaging through a medium, so nobody has to look at each other. Everyone's looking at the medium, which I think so that's what we do. But I'm really interested in hearing more about the kind of the detail of how it works from other people, because we're kind of just beginning in this area.